Okay, so I'd like to talk about root policy chaining because we're going to have more than one policy on our BGP peers, and how these interoperate is really quite important. Now, in the normal world, you would have in a policy permit, deny all, or perhaps deny, permit all. However, what Juniper's done with these policies is really pretty awesome. So this allows you to have sort of some permits, some denies, and mix them up and not get lost. It's very natural. So just going to do an example here. So what happens is you go through the first policy. If you match a term, you accept or reject. If you don't explicitly match a term, then what happens is you roll into the next policy. You go through the next policy. And then if you don't specifically match a term, you go into any extra policies, any last policy. And then if no term is matched, you get the default action. And each routing protocol has a different default action. You can see them on the Juniper website. And also some very slight differences between an export and an import, which is what you'd expect. It's actually quite natural and worth a look. Now, let's have a look at an example here. So we have two policies applying to our external BGP peers. We have the default filter, we have the IX filter in this case. So set policy options, policy statement, default filter, term 1. From route filter 00 through 032. So that's any default route, any length mask. So if you were to match that and you were to reject it, you'd leave the policies, job done. But let's just say you're an ordinary route. So we haven't matched, so we go through to the end of the policy, and then of course we go into the next policy. And the next policy says from route filter 00 prefix length range /8/24. So it's looking for an ordinary route in, in the class A through class C style size with a mask of /8/24, i.e. not a supernet and not a mask beyond 24 bits. So let's say we were an ordinary route, would be accepted, would leave the policies. Now, if we didn't fit that, we'd go into any other policies, and we'd end up with a default action. And that default action would be what BGP would do. However, in our case, we have a terminating term here, which everything is going to reject. So it's a reject, and we leave the list. And this allows us to have a combination of denies and permits and use them all. So the first list here is a kind of a, well, if you match this, reject, and then no default. And then this list is, well, if you match this, then accept. So we're able to mix the two. Really, really interesting. You can see all about it here on policy routing policies chain, evaluation method, and .html and juniper.net. And that's a really useful way to understand how these policies are going to work. Because, of course, if this policy was before this policy, then this term would reject everything. And that is why they have to go in the correct order. So you do need to be aware of that as you add your policies onto your peers.